Oh no, the world has fallen into chaos. Restore the crystals and save the world, young nameless boy whose hometown is just suddenly gone. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is an RPG designed to introduce new players into the genre. Many mechanics are simplified to facilitate ease of learning. You don't need to get to a save point, instead you can just save anywhere. Chests filled with consumable items respawn, so you have an endless supply of items and can't get stuck. Items are cheap and you can easily afford to buy 99 of each consumable item, which makes resting at inns rendered largely irrelevant. The world map is set to individual levels rather than being free roaming through an overworld. In combat, things are also simplified. Spellcasts do not use MP, instead opting for a classic Dungeons & Dragons style of number of casts. You'll have a set number of casts for white, black, and wizard magic. White is for healing, black is for damage spells, and wizard is just better black magic. Despite being an introductory RPG, Mystic Quest does some things that are fairly unique to RPGs. You gain various weapons throughout the adventure, and they all have a world use. Your sword can be used to open doors, the axe can cut down trees blocking your path, bombs can blow up obstacles, the claw can be used to both climb walls and act as a grappling hook. You don't need to grind in Mystic Quest, but there are a few areas called battlefields that simply exist to give you some extra experience. These have EXP and GP rewards, and some hide spells and items that will help you on your adventure. You also have some very minor platforming elements, and you can jump. It's fun to jump around, and it makes things a little more interesting than just your standard sauntering around dungeons. Mystic Quest isn't anything special to look at. A lot of the sprite work is borrowed from other Final Fantasies. The environments look alright, it gets the point across, but production values aren't a selling point of the game. Battle graphics are stoic with very little animation. They do change based on how damaged the enemy is, which is a moderately nice touch. The music is nothing special. It definitely feels like they didn't bother pulling out the first stringers for it. That really applies to the whole of Mystic Quest. It just feels like a slapped-together project. It's so slapped together that it doesn't even have a story. I actually mean that. There is no driving force, no overarching narrative. You are quite literally told by a random man that you're the chosen one, and then he leaves. He shows up periodically to tell you to go to whatever the next area dictated to you is, then just as suddenly leaves. Even the protagonist knows that it's stupid. For a genre where one of the main draws is characters and story, Mystic Quest offers absolutely nothing to draw you in. It actually uses a lot of tropes and cliches that people familiar with the Final Fantasy games and other RPGs will get. However, if you aren't familiar with those games and are actually playing Mystic Quest as an introduction to the genre, its intended purpose, then you'll just be confused. It pulls some pretty typical anime and RPG tropes where at the final area you're told about some prophecy and you have to fight the super secret Dark King. It's awful, and it's really just insulting. Mystic Quest is a really easy game. It's by design an introductory RPG. Unfortunately, it's incredibly inconsistent and actually completely unfair throughout the entirety of the adventure. Many things in the game are designed to treat you with the kid gloves. Initially, your HP bars are not actually set as numbers, instead by blocks, as if that's somehow easier to convey your health totals. I guess numbers are just too hard for us to understand. Your various partners that come and go are by default AI controlled. You can change them to manual control, but it's rarely required as battles are so easy that you'll be wishing you had a turbo button, and thankfully I did. The AI is awful, let's be clear on that. It will use inferior healing items as opposed to spells, or use whatever it feels like. It does prioritize healing status on both your characters, so that can be a benefit. It also has the added bonus of being able to react to what the enemy has done that turn, so toggling between AI and manual isn't a bad idea under some circumstances. Now here comes the inconsistent and unfair difficulty. A lot of enemies inflict debilitating status effects. Things like paralyze, sleep, and especially petrify can cause you unnecessary deaths. When you take into account bosses have some very strong attacks and often come with sidekick monsters, you can die deceptively easily. You always have the option to retry a battle, so it's not a huge issue in the grand scheme of things. You just continue from the start of the fight and give it another go. But this is a crutch to get over incredibly poor design choices. Having both your characters be petrified in a single turn, or before you can even react, and forced to start the fight over isn't an overly uncommon occurrence. It's common to just wipe on some of the bosses just because of some dice roll. In fact, it's not even uncommon to wipe on random battles by the same things. These mechanics insultingly result in the ability to lose the very first tutorial battle in the game. I lost it, twice in a row. There is nothing you can do here. You can only use the attack command, and if you miss too many times, or you get critically hit, you just lose. You have to win, and the game has no failsafe to ensure that you can't lose in this first fight. It's a great way to start the game, and really sets the tone for the rest of the adventure. Losing a battle is just an obnoxious exercise because it causes you to start over from the beginning. It completely bloats the length of the game. Getting Pazuzu down to his final form, then being forced to restart the whole thing multiple times because he decided to petrify your team does not make for an enjoyable experience. It really feels like some encounters are set up to be as annoying as possible. You got 3 wizards. I sure hope you're lucky with instant kill procs from the Dragon Claw because they can and will heal all the damage you deal in the same turn. It turns battles into an extremely monotonous and maddening task when they should just be really short and to the point. Thankfully, Mystic Quest isn't overly long, roughly marking around the 7 to 8 hour mark casually, if you're not looking at maps to get through the dungeons as fast as possible. I did clear all the battlefields with a turbo controller, so that will have some implications on time spent. There are no random encounters, instead enemies are just placed on tiles. You will have to fight a lot of enemies just because of placements and they're obviously obstructing your path. The benefit to this is that you can actually avoid a lot of combat. There are a few sections that have invisible monsters until you get an item, like the magic mirror or the gas mask, which does sort of emulate the random battle features of most RPGs. Until you get the exit spell, which is totally optional and hidden by the way, you have to manually trek out of every dungeon. This is a really obnoxious design choice because for a lot of the dungeons, after beating the boss, your partner just leaves. You're suddenly alone in a dungeon and forced to walk back out, which means you're probably not fighting any of the battles on the way. Let's not beat around the bush here. Mystic Quest is long-winded for no reason. Most dungeons like the Lava Dome are needlessly confusing to navigate and it's really easy to get lost. Some JRPGs do have confusing maps, but most are actually fairly intuitive to navigate. Battles are so mindlessly easy in Mystic Quest that you actually dread having to fight them because it means you're spending even longer playing the game. I actually would recommend maps for every dungeon, starting at the Lava Dome, as it starts to get really confusing and frustrating to just wander around these areas over and over trying to figure out where to go. It should be pretty obvious, but Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is a joke. It's an insult to the player's intelligence and a horribly boring experience to play through. But more than that, it fails at its intended purpose, which is a game to introduce new players into the RPG genre. It fails spectacularly by having shallow mechanics instead of having core concepts. It fails by having difficulty that is simultaneously brain-dead simple and easy, and completely unfair, and can cause you to lose battles without any chance at all. Getting both of your party members petrified in the same turn is not an uncommon occurrence, and it's a reality of the terrible design of Mystic Quest. It relies on pre-established series tropes which new players won't get or understand, and has a pathetic excuse for a story which is a genre and series staple. If you wanted to get into the genre, there are a plethora of JRPGs that are casual with easy to understand mechanics, reasonable stories, and much more enjoyable graphics and gameplay. Some of those are widely considered some of the greatest games ever made, so why wouldn't you play those instead? Final Fantasy Mystic Quest truly deserves recommended playing's most disgraceful verdict of not recommended. If you disagree with the verdict, go ahead and leave a comment. If you like the video, maybe you should subscribe. Something you could do on YouTube.